The forbidden mind. In every prison on Earth, there is a second world running underneath the official one. A world where the most powerful objects are the ones you are not allowed to have. Phones, pills, homemade tools, food taken from the kitchen. Each item is a risk. Each risk is a message. And every message reveals one uncomfortable truth. The human brain will always chase reward, even when the punishment could destroy everything. Today, we expose the psychology of prison contraband, not the items, but the mind behind the risk. This documentary contains descriptions of prison conditions and violence for educational purposes based on verified sources. Viewer discretion is advised. For more deep research of prison documentary like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Risk, scarcity, and the human brain behind bars. Contraband is not random. It is a response to scarcity, isolation, and the survival instinct that grows sharper inside a controlled environment. Research from the National Institute of Justice shows that contraband patterns follow predictable psychological triggers: scarcity, survival, social hierarchy, and reward-seeking behavior. Studies by Dr. Craig Haney reveal that when people live under strict deprivation, limited contact, limited freedom, limited choices, the mind begins to develop alternative reward systems. Small objects gain oversized meaning. Forbidden objects become symbols of control, identity, or escape. Sociologist John Irwin, in his analysis of inmate culture, documented how contraband often fills emotional gaps the institution cannot: connection, autonomy, or the feeling of being alive in an environment designed to reduce individuality. This documentary explores the minds shaped by deprivation, and the risks they take when the forbidden becomes the only thing that feels real. The first decision, when risk detects reward. Every contraband journey starts long before the item appears. It begins with a psychological calculation, often unconscious, shaped by stress, scarcity, and the inmate's social structure. According to data analyzed by the Chicago Crime Lab, inmates exposed to high-stress environments develop heightened sensitivity to reward cues. In simple terms, the more stressful the environment, the more powerful the reward feels. For one inmate in a medium-security facility, the moment came during a routine kitchen shift. No violence. No confrontation. Just a simple choice: pocket a food item that wasn't supposed to leave the back door. But the psychology behind that choice was anything but simple. Deprivation made the item meaningful. Peer influence raised the stakes. A small act of rule-breaking triggered a sense of control in a life where almost nothing felt controllable. The American Psychological Association notes that when a person's autonomy is restricted, even minor forbidden acts activate dopamine pathways normally used for major rewards. Inside prison, that effect is multiplied. This is the moment where contraband shifts from an object to an idea, from a rule violation to a relief mechanism, from a simple decision to a calculated gamble between punishment and psychological survival. The social currency of the forbidden. Once an inmate crosses the line for the first time, the object itself becomes secondary. What matters now is value, not financial value, but psychological and social value. Inside every correctional facility, documented extensively by John Irwin's Inmate Social Hierarchy research, contraband becomes a form of identity. Not because of the item, but because of what control over that item communicates. Power, resourcefulness, reputation. But the deeper layer is psychological. Studies from the National Institute of Justice show that inmates don't only seek contraband to consume it, they seek it because it grants status in an environment where their previous identities have been stripped away. A phone isn't just a device, it's a symbol of connection. A food item isn't just calories, it's a symbol of freedom. A simple tool isn't just metal, it's a symbol of capability. These symbols create social currency. One inmate, known for always getting small comfort items from the kitchen, never used them himself. He distributed them. Not for money, not for favors, but for influence. This is consistent with psychological models of resource control. In environments with severe deprivation, people who create access become central figures in the social network. even without authority. The object becomes a message. I can get what you can't. And that message spreads faster than any contraband item ever could. But with influence comes attention. With attention comes envy. And with envy comes risk. The psychology of reward begins to merge with the psychology of danger, setting the stage for the next transformation. The emotional economy. Why contraband feels like freedom. Contraband doesn't survive because it's profitable. It survives because it means something emotionally in a place designed to remove emotional stimulation. Psychologists from the American Psychological Association explain that when people are placed in high-control environments, the brain begins to assign intense emotional weight to any experience that feels voluntary. Inside prison, almost nothing is voluntary. That's why even the smallest forbidden object becomes a powerful emotional anchor. For one inmate interviewed in a state facility study, the emotional attachment didn't form around a phone, a tool, or a substance. It formed around something almost insignificant, a pen he wasn't supposed to keep after his work shift. A cheap, ordinary pen. But to him, it represented the one feeling the institution could never fully remove. The pen wasn't valuable in the outside world. Inside, it was a piece of psychological territory. This aligns with Craig Haney's research. When autonomy is restricted, the human mind creates new emotional hierarchies. Objects become symbols. Symbols become emotional lifelines. Contraband becomes a coping mechanism, not because of what it does, but because of what it represents. For some, it represents connection. For others, control. For others still, it represents a tiny fragment of normal life preserved inside an abnormal world. And in an environment where trust is rare and vulnerability is dangerous, these emotional attachments begin shaping behavior in ways that are far more complex than simple rule-breaking. But emotional meaning comes with emotional consequences, and those consequences ripple far beyond a single object. The next stage is where psychology clashes with reality. Risk, fear, and the addiction of reward. In previous chapter, the psychology of contraband is no longer just about survival or social status. It becomes about the brain's relationship with risk itself. Research from the Chicago Crime Lab and NIJ behavioral studies shows that repeated exposure to high-stakes decision-making rewires the brain's reward system. Inmates who successfully acquire contraband experience a dopamine surge, similar to what occurs in gambling or other high-reward behaviors. This creates a feedback loop. Take a risk 2. Acquire contraband 3. Experience reward 4. Increase willingness for future risk. The process becomes addictive, not in the substance sense, but psychologically. The thrill of successfully outsmarting the system reinforces behavior far more powerfully than the object itself. One former inmate, interviewed in a CDCR behavioral study, admitted that the fear of getting caught actually intensified the satisfaction of success. It wasn't about the snack or the tool, it was the fact I did it, and no one knew. Psychologist Haney explains this as the intersection of reward anticipation and environmental deprivation. In short, the brain craves victories where it has control, no matter how small, and contraband becomes a perfect vehicle. But the higher the reward, the higher the consequence. And every decision carries a latent threat: solitary confinement, extended sentences, or social backlash from other inmates. The tension between reward and fear creates a psychological pressure cooker, shaping inmates' behavior in subtle, profound ways. Some become meticulous planners, treating smuggling like a science. Some rely on impulsivity, riding the thrill of chaos. All are bound by the invisible rules of trust, observation, and hierarchy. This is the paradox of contraband psychology. The very act that provides control also threatens control, creating a constant mental balancing act. The invisible rules: trust, alliances, and betrayal. By now, contraband has transformed from a simple object into a complex social and psychological system. According to John Irwin's research on inmate social networks, contraband is governed not just by scarcity or reward, but by unwritten rules that dictate who can acquire, distribute, or even touch it. Breaking these rules can carry consequences far more severe than punishment by the institution. It can result in social exile or targeted retaliation. Trust is the currency. Every interaction involving contraband is a test of reliability, observation, and loyalty. Alliances form around access. Inmates who can obtain or distribute items become central figures in networks of influence. Reciprocity governs transactions. One small favor can ripple into a series of obligations. Betrayal has high stakes. A misstep can permanently damage relationships and social standing. A study from the Chicago Crime Lab highlights that inmates often take calculated social risks equal to or even greater than the physical risks of getting caught. In other words, a phone or a packet of contraband is never just an object. It is a test of character and strategy, and how one navigates it can define their survival in the microcosm of prison society. Psychologically, this aligns with social exchange theory. Every action is weighed against potential gains and losses. Contraband, then, becomes a lens to observe human behavior under extreme restriction. Cooperation, competition, trust, and manipulation all amplified by scarcity and isolation. For many, mastering these invisible rules is not optional. It is essential to maintaining identity, autonomy, and a sense of agency in an environment designed to strip both away. And yet, even mastery carries risk. Because in a world where control is rare, the line between power and exposure is razor thin. The psychology of escape. Control in a controlled world. By Chapter 6, the story of contraband transcends objects, rules, and social networks. It becomes a story about psychological survival. Research from Dr. Craig Haney and the American Psychological Association demonstrates that extreme restriction triggers a need for autonomy and control, even in the smallest forms. Contraband provides precisely that. Every smuggled item, every hidden transaction, and every risk taken is a micro-assertion of freedom in a place where freedom is systematically stripped away. It's not rebellion in the classic sense. It's survival through psychological compensation. Former inmates interviewed in CDCR and Illinois Department of Corrections studies report similar patterns. Items are hoarded not just for personal gain, but as symbols of control. The thrill of circumventing rules creates a sense of mental agency. Small victories reinforce identity, self-efficacy, and emotional resilience. This is why contraband psychology is so potent. It is reward, status, and autonomy rolled into one. It explains why some inmates will risk severe punishment for items that, to outsiders, seem trivial. It also explains the behavioral patterns observed across prisons worldwide. Strategic planning, patience, and risk assessment. Manipulation of social networks for protection or leverage. Creation of informal economies built entirely on trust, scarcity, and psychology rather than formal currency. In essence, contraband becomes a tool for reclaiming humanity in an environment designed to erase it. But even the most calculated strategies cannot fully eliminate risk. The higher the perceived value of the object, the greater the chance of exposure, and every choice carries real consequences for the mind and body. In the final chapter, we examine how this cycle of risk, reward, and social power shapes the long-term psyche of inmates, even after release. The long game. How contraband shapes minds beyond bars. Contraband is more than a prison problem. It is a psychological phenomenon with lasting effects. Research from Haney, Irwin, and the Chicago Crime Lab shows that the patterns formed around risk-taking, reward-seeking, and social maneuvering do not vanish upon release. Inmates who repeatedly navigate contraband systems develop heightened risk assessment skills, understanding both tangible and social consequences. Strategic thinking under pressure, planning multiple steps ahead while managing limited resources. Social intelligence, reading allies, adversaries, and informal hierarchies with precision. But there's a paradox. While these skills can be adaptive, the constant engagement with risk also conditions the brain to seek high-reward stimuli, sometimes making ordinary life seem less stimulating. This is why many former inmates describe the period immediately after release as both liberating and psychologically challenging. Contraband, therefore, is not just a system of objects or trade. It is a window into the human mind under extreme constraint, revealing how scarcity magnifies value, how forbidden rewards strengthen desire, how social hierarchies shape behavior, how even small victories can become essential to identity and survival. By studying contraband, we study resilience, ingenuity, and the drive for autonomy. We see how the mind seeks freedom in the tightest confines, and how psychology can survive, adapt, and even thrive under the harshest conditions. Psychology, understanding is power. Prison contraband is more than smuggling. It is a story of the human mind under pressure, a psychological ecosystem of risk, reward, and social maneuvering. If this documentary opened your eyes to the hidden world inside prisons, don't forget to subscribe. We bring you deep dives into the psychology of crime, human behavior, and survival, backed by research, real stories, and factual insights. Hit the bell icon so you never miss the next journey behind the bars. Your curiosity fuels more stories like this, and in the world of prison,